So, again, I want to welcome you to Love Over Coffee. We have been engaged in 31 nights to bring awareness to the issue of domestic violence, and it is hard for me to believe, but we are at night 31. So, happy Halloween, and let's get down to business. So, welcome again. I do want to showcase one thing in the and I don't know how to make it show, um, but I do want to show you. I think I have pinned a product, and it's called the Shadow Work Journal, and it's a guide to integrate and transcend your shadows. And it is all about your triggers, your feelings, your emotions, and again, going back and healing that inner child. Um, and that's one of the things that my my guest and I are going to talk about tonight is as much as you never own the abuse, when you move forward from it, and you become a survivor, a thriver, an overcomer, a warrior, whatever you want to say, angels for others, then you go back in time and you heal that inner child that may have led you down that path, um, toward a relationship that was not worthy of you. Okay, that was not worthy of you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip the camera and I'm going to bring on my guest. Yes, Sue, I think that when I reach 5,000 followers, I'll be able to have a little yellow cart down there. But let me see. I'm going to flip the camera. All right. So, welcome again to Love Over Coffee. Voices Now Heard. This is a platform and a podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And tonight, we will end as we started. And that is Gina Medico is here. She is a paralegal, an advocate. She does a lot of work on her own time, her own schedule, and on her own dime to help other um, domestic violence survivors and or victims that are still in the system, going through the system, figuring out the system. And so, Gina Medico, welcome back to night 31 of 31 nights of this podcast this month. And tell us a little bit of your own story, because I don't think anyone has a sense of who you are, where you've been, or where you're going. So let's start there. And I'm gonna make the I'm gonna while you gather your thoughts, we'll do the countdown. And I'm gonna bring you up big. All right. So Gina, take it away.
Well, thank you, Tina. It's great to be here. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I feel like we're getting a lot of messages out that need to be heard, and hopefully help. Even if it's one woman, we help. We've helped someone, and that's what we aim to do. Um, so I have my story. I was a paralegal. I was came from a dysfunctional family. It came from a lot of abandonment issues in my family. A lot of absent people in my life, people that weren't supportive, people that didn't really care too much about my well-being. So I I learned at a young age that I didn't really have the protection of a father. He was abandoned me as a child. So I learned that I had to somewhat protect myself in a lot of ways. And I always had a passion for law. It was one of the subjects I took in school, and I think I excelled at it. I loved it. It seemed to come somewhat a little bit easy to me for some reason. So when I had you know ideas of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, it was to become a paralegal and a lawyer, and be in that field, and to help others, who were experiencing, some of the childhood traumas that we often see that leads us into CPS and those industries, of child uh, being awarded the state, or child uh, foster care type. I I really did want to help children in that way. And then life happens, and I have my because I think where I came from, like how my life, and I having a very low threshold of support around me. Everything mostly I heard was very negative from caseworkers and from other people that I looked up to kind of be that support system. I was hearing a lot of negative things, like I was never going to amount to anything. I was, going to be on drugs and alcohol, which is not anything that I really, really got involved with. It seemed whenever I did anything, I got caught right away, and I would get into serious trouble. It's like the one time, and then I would have friends that would do it every night, morning, noon, and night, and never did they ever get caught. It was and I always felt like I was held to a different standard in my life. I had an absent father. He lived 4 miles away from me and my brother and sister, and he did not see us at all. There was absolutely no interaction with my father. He owned a pub in the town that I lived in, and he also owned a antique emporium, and he also had rental property for others to rent. However, my sister, brother, and I were living at times without heat, hot water, without water. There were times that it was just really, and we lived in a cold climate at times, and it was very felt dehumanizing, and you just felt like nobody cared. And you go through a period in your life as a child when you just you don't know that that's unusual. You don't really know that people see you differently. You don't you often don't feel like you fit in, and it's can be quite uncomfortable.
And even if you're not being told you're not worthy,
Right.
the messages you're receiving are, I don't feel like my father values me. So how can anyone else? I mean, the messages become internal and repetitive, even if the person never says you're not going to be worth anything,
Mhm.
because you're taking it in so many other ways.
Right.
Neglect, as you said, abandonment.
Right. And but there was an inner drive in me. I mean, I have faith. I believe in a higher power. I believe in God. So I always felt that whatever they were saying was not true. I just didn't let it bother me too much. I mean, it did bother me. I'm not going to lie about that. It was very difficult, because it wasn't like covert uh, being left out of things. It was people saying to my face that we're all going here and you're not coming, kind of thing. And it was really, you didn't know why. You didn't know if you did something. you just didn't know. You just knew that you were excluded, and they had their reasons, and okay, So, I spent a lot of time on my own. I still spend a lot of time on my own. I do feel more comfortable when I'm by myself. I'm not sure if it's a form of protection, but, self-preservation. But, I do read a lot. One of the things that I did have the opportunity of when I was a child was having a good education. I believe I had a good education. I did go to a private school for a while. I did make great grades. Um, I like to read. I know that I was reading books that were more advanced than what my grade level was at times. Um, and I just felt like I couldn't get enough. Couldn't get enough. I like to draw. There was things that I did to take up the time that I was in. I call it a forced isolation. Because
Right.
you're not able to talk. It started when I was a young age. You're not to talk to anybody. One of the things that was really big in my family was hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. And that was often something that was said to me, when I was experiencing something. So that it made it, when you're young, it makes it, you're afraid to talk to anybody, So, one of the things, I really did want to go to college. I did have that aspiration, but it was made clear to me that I would have to do that on my own dime. One of the things that, I was fortunate to, if you want to call it fortune, but I do, is that I was eligible for a Pell Grant um, because of the circumstances that I experienced as a young child. So I was able to get some of my education paid for. So I was able to, um, you know, get a degree in paralegal and, you know, pursue my, you know, dreams and aspirations. One of the things I do regret, and if there's any young person out there that may be experiencing some of the uh, things that I experienced as a child, don't be afraid to get a school loan. Do not be afraid to get it. That was one of the things that I was so super afraid of getting, was a school loan to take my education higher. And I regret that. That is like my number one biggest regret, is to not, as when I was younger, getting that degree, um, so that I could be more self-sustaining, than I am, and a lot of it, had to do with people telling me that I was, you know, never, not worth anything. I was not that smart, and things like that, that just makes you feel insecure.
Mm.
So, one of the things, that it was, really a big dream of mine to go to get my bachelor's degree. And I was able to do that a few years ago, so, about 7 years ago now. And, I expanded upon my paralegal degree, of course, because who wants to be in a classroom at any age, really, right?
At any
But,
age,
it's a
got
little
that right.
exactly, but it's a little bit better when you're younger. It has its good things, because you are an experienced person, so you have, you're able to catch things at a different level than someone who does have that
Right.
inexperience. And one of the things that about me that I realized, when I went through this horrific divorce. The marriage was bad enough, but to go through the divorce experience was just, it was incomprehensible. It still is to me today, that this is how our system is run. Um, but one of the things that I did learn while I was going through my education is that, um, you know there is no one definitive cause, as they want to say, for domestic violence. Um, but I do want to say there are some of us who are predisposed to domestic violence, and that is someone who you know, experienced abuse, or they watched a parent who was abusive. They experienced those things as a young adult, a young child, young adult. Those, those are the factors that make someone to be predisposed to domestic violence. So that's one of the things that, you know, was definitive to me when I was taking my classes for criminal justice, with an emphasis on domestic violence and victimization and offender rehabilitation. So one of the things that I experienced in my dissolution case was that, um, you know, I was in an abusive situation. There was physical abuse as well as sexual abuse, and also uh, psychological and emotional abuse. Um, you know, you can always look back and say I would have done things differently. And honestly, if I had known that the court system was as biased as it was, which one of the things that I did find in my education when I was studying for my classes was that there was a report that was put out in 1995 by the Florida uh, judicial system that did talk about how biased the judicial system was against women. And if I had known that I did not stand a chance of getting custody of my children, I believe that I would have rearranged myself and my life so that I stayed with him, but was more protective of myself. You know,
And I do think some women learn that. They learn that I
right,
can't win, so I'll
correct.
stay and do what I can. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And you know, it's a sad thing to say. You just want, you know, I have never met in all in my experience through my entire life, even dealing with other children who were my peers when I was in foster care or a group home setting. There was not one child in there, and I mean it. There was not one child in there that didn't pray and hope for and wish for their own parent to get well and to come get them. That was their biggest dream. That was their biggest fantasy. It was mine as well. I wanted the people in my life to get a grip, get a hold of themselves and figure it out on their own. Because as a child, I knew I can't be this horrible of a child as you think I am. I mean, what am I doing? I'm making great grades in school. I like to sing and dance. I mean, Shirley Temple was my favorite. Who didn't love Shirley Temple and want to, you know, dance like her? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, what was, you know, how bad could I have possibly been that I was, you know, thought of as the way I
Children are
was?
not born broken.
Exactly.
Children are
Right.
not born broken.
Right. They're just born with a clean palate and they need to be redirected at times. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. This happens to me.
That's
Uh
okay. So take us back to the relationship that you were in that you decided to dissolve for many
yes.
reasons: the
Yes.
mental, the physical, the psychological, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse.
Right.
Um, and you said the system was not built
No.
for you
Right.
as a victim.
Correct. You know, one of the things, and you know, I usually say this at the beginning of when I speak, and I didn't tonight, but I'm going to say it now. The most dangerous time for a woman is when she is leaving or when she has left. That is a chance when she's going to be 84% stalked. And that is where, you know, we need to start watching and putting more of our resources to that aspect of a woman who is in, you know, domestic violence situations. If she does make that choice to leave, you know, she really does need to have, you know, more security. And you know, I think it would be interesting to kind of flip it more on controlling him. And the reason is if you know more of what he's doing and what his mind is doing, his mind is thinking, what is he saying, what is he plotting, I think that, there are chances possibly that, either it can be dispelled. That's, you know, ha ha kind of word, but there's got to be a way that we need to start getting the men who are abusive, because it's more men than women. I know the statistics are out there, but um, there's a great more it's more women. We all know that. So I think that if we start focusing resources on watching the person who is accused of being abusive, then I think that there's more chances of their uh, not being as volatile as they can be.
Well, I mean, look at the Gabby Petito case. They were so focused, and mind you, they should have been at one point after, but when they became so focused on her missing case,
Right.
they allowed him to exist in that house, and
Hmm.
no one was really following him or
Right.
watching him. And at the end of the day, he basically turned up missing as well. Mind you, his own efforts to do so. But at the time, it's like the police were not focused on the accused at that point. They
Hmm.
were focused on the victim.
Right.
Mind you, not that she should be forgotten, but at the same time, had they been watching him, we might have a lot more answers than we have today.
Correct. Yes.
They weren't.
I agree.
They dropped the ball.
Right.
So, can we say that in the system, when they're not focused on the abuser and they're focused on the victim, in your case, Gina, what were they focused on?
They were focused on my mental health. Um, the fact that I had sought counseling prior to my marriage, the fact that I had sought counseling when I chose to end my relationship with him. I did try to seek counseling when we were married. He told me that we didn't need it. Let's just get a 6-pack, which I didn't drink beer, and go to the beach and go on a date. He did that one time. And then after that, he didn't think that we needed it. Um, I did everything I could, I believe, to try to save my marriage. I was not, I did not, it did not take me more than twice to get out of my marriage. And then the first time, the problem is with Florida law is that if they believe that you're okay, most states, okay, and this is one of the things that we all have a misconception as is if you claim to be abused, that they're going to listen to you and they're going to do everything in their power to protect you. We have fallen into this myth. It's a myth. It's not true. Um, you know, Most often than that, it's a he said, she said. You know, there's no investigation of who's really at fault. And so women believe that they're going to go to the courthouse, they're going to file for divorce. Sometimes she may not even have called the police. I didn't call the police in my instance. I felt like I did not want my husband in trouble. I didn't. I wanted him to get help. I called his parents. And the judge made it known to me that I should have been calling the police. And, I think that's pretty sad that, when you have someone who's abusive and they clearly know he's abusive to you, that, he doesn't have that support system himself, that they're going to be saying, look, you really can't do that to your wife. There was no intervention on their part to have him look at me realistically and not as someone who, you know, I don't even know what he thought of me. All I know was I was working. I took care of the children. I took care of the household. I took care of the lawn care. I mean, what more? I mean, I wasn't a partier. I didn't have, I was home with my children all the time. There was no reason for him to, be so abusive. I mean, abusive towards me, but even those aren't the reasons, but I'm just saying that I don't know what life he was living, because it certainly wasn't the same that I was living.
So but then that means that the victim is running the gamut of why do you leave and why did you stay, all the way to the opposite end of that is, well, if things were so bad, why didn't you call the police? But yet we know that women call the police come, they either listen intently and do nothing, or they don't listen intently and they do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They basically can either arrest both people,
Mm-hmm.
or they can arrest the wrong one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But sometimes perhaps they do arrest the right one, but then the next day it's like everything is right back to the way it was, as though nothing had occurred.
Right.
So it's like you're punished either direction you go. And then
Right.
in your case, you sought help prior to the marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it seemed to be the only thing they were focused on.
Right. They were using my records. They, first of all, the law is that, in Florida and most places, that the only way that someone can get your records is for further treatment. It's not used as a detrimental weapon, something harmful to someone. Think about it. When you go and you spill your private moments with someone to somebody who is paid to be trusted, you want to have that free flowing conversation about what is personal to you. And when that is destroyed, which is what happened in my case, you don't really want to tell anybody your secret. And one of the things that I learned, because I did have great counselors, it was the people that were in charge of those records that were
right.
Number one, they didn't know the law. Number two, they didn't really care. And that's just not kind of how I look at it. There's in Florida, especially, I don't know about other states. I know Connecticut is the same way. You have to have a subpoena with a court order. You cannot have just a subpoena to release psychiatric records. It has to have a corresponding court order. So if people are telling you, oh, you get a subpoena, you have to release those records. No, not for psychiatric records. And so, I think it's very important that that if you're going to be going into a divorce situation, that what your issues may be. If you know that your issues are, okay, well, I did see a therapist for a while, you need to make sure that you know what the law is, and you make sure the persons that you entrusted with your confidential information knows what the law is. Because I'm telling you right now, 90% of them don't know the law. They don't know the law that pertains to their profession.
And sometimes I feel as though attorneys will turn over stuff thinking that there's really nothing in there that can be used. But what's harsh about the system is when they say everything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law,
right.
If you're dealing with an abuser,
mm-hmm.
they will remember something that you said back on September 10th of 1963, and they will remember every detail of where it was said and when it was said and why it was said and probably what the hell you were wearing.
Exactly.
But man, ask them where they were Saturday night, and I don't recall.
Yeah, exactly. But what's sad about that is they're going to leave the most important things out, and they're going to add information that's just not there. They're going to fabricate stories. So we all know that. But because there's a little bit of a half truth, because you were there at that time and day and you were wearing that, flower dress, they are going to make up a story.
Right.
And it's going to seem plausible
Well,
to
that
other
was the day
people.
she was upset about da 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 da.
Exactly.
And all that part's a lie, but
Right.
everything else
It's
was
true.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So,
you so you lost your kids.
so I lost my children as a result of medical record therapy records that I had never seen before. My attorney never obtained those records. Which, if you have an attorney and there's an issue that arises, and your attorney does not have those records before anyone else, you need to get a new attorney.
Right.
And you need to make sure you get those records, or you get whatever it is, so that you know what's in those records, because I never knew what was in those records. Never knew it. I just I can continue through life. I can continue through life. I was in school, college, and I was working sometimes 3 jobs to support myself. I had lived on my own since I was about 17. So when I graduated high school, so I was self-supportive. So a lot of what was said about me just was not true. And, it was very hard when you have, been vulnerable with an organization that you believed was going to protect you.
Right.
And you had an attorney that you believed was going to protect you, who it seemed in more cases than not was almost like feeding you to him on a silver platter. And I did often say that when I was going through it. I just feel like you're feeding me to him on a silver platter. It's like, have at her. What else? I don't care about her. Why? Nobody cares about her.
Well,
And
and
it's
it's
that
almost like
mentality that we have.
they want him to have more of an opportunity to prove himself right
Right.
than for you to have an opportunity to prove that what he's saying is wrong.
Right.
And so it's almost like I always say, we live in a country where we say you're innocent until proven guilty, except you're arrested first.
Right.
And then you prove your way out.
Right.
And proving your way out after you've been arrested, you already look guilty, even though you have perhaps done nothing except be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe doing the wrong thing, or whatever. And all that circumstantial evidence that arrested you is the same circumstantial evidence that comes back to haunt you later.
Right.
And you're inside. You're inside trying to prove yourself right when they're on the outside with all the resources to prove you wrong.
Exactly. And, oftentimes, there was hearings that I was having. Once I found out from getting my attorney's bill that my records were released, even though I had gone through a court hearing, the hearing was so bizarre. It was so, I get when I get nervous, I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go pee. And so I had to go, right? So first of all, we were in a small courtroom, right? Very tiny courtroom, 2 tables, very intimate. And the judge, because I was soft-spoken, the judge believed that she couldn't hear me. So she needed to move the courtroom to a huge a formal courtroom, instead of like a private little, 2-party.
Right, like a mediation kind of room versus.
No, this was like a full-blown 12 jury box, 12-seat jury box, the whole thing. And okay, so she can't hear me, so she's taking us to this bigger room. And I believe it was meant to intimidate me. Okay. So so they excused me to use the restroom, and I have the court transcript. And if you read through the court transcript, they're talking about my medical records while I'm away. I know, and it's on court record. And so I have no idea that these records were obtained by my ex. He got them in one day. I believe he already had them. I believe that they were using them. I believe that they, knew. One of my ex-husband's favorite things to say to me all the time was, "You think people are out to get you, Gina? You You always think people are out to get you. That was such a psychotic thing to say. And I'm like, one day I looked at him, I said, what do you think? I mean, out to get me how? That was one of the questions that they asked in my deposition when I was suing my attorney was, you think people are out to get me? And I'm like, no, I just don't think anybody's out to help me. And that's really what I felt, because everybody around me, I believed, had the tool to stop him. They saw what he was doing. They heard what he was saying to me. And what I was hearing a lot of people saying was, now, Michael, that's not really nice. That's not really nice to say.
Yeah.
Go over there and play with your toys. Go be come on. It's like, stop him in his tracks, stop him and stand up for me. Have a backbone. And there's this whole thing that, oh, things are different with women in the system. No. Most of the people that were involved in my case were women. I had 2 women judges. I had 2 women attorneys, and none of them were putting forth what I had asked them to do. I wanted them to be just as harsh to them as they were to me, and they weren't doing it. It's like, why are you like, just a lot of what they were telling me was stuff that he did was not relevant. It's just not relevant. It's just not relevant. But when it came time to trial, everything that he did was used, and it was the judge used it as part of her decision.
Right.
But, the fact that he stole a car and wrapped it around a tree when he was a teenager was not relevant. But the fact that I had experienced trauma as a child, that was relevant. None of that, anything that I said to counteract what he was doing to me, everything was not relevant. So it just makes you, you wonder what reality they're living in. It's just so it's such a logical. It's such a illogical thinking. There's no logic to it at all. It makes absolutely no sense. And one of the biggest thing that made absolutely no sense to me, Tina, is here they're using my records telling me that I did not heal from my childhood traumas. Now, mind you, I didn't even think about my experience as a child anymore.
Right.
Totally forgot it until I got a copy of my records from my ex-husband when I fired my attorney. And I'm like, oh my God. I had no idea that this was in here. And what was happening was my ex-husband was also calling me and tormenting me with what I experienced as a child, as if he was now experiencing it and himself. It was so brutal. And there was times when I honestly felt like I was asking people, is my name really Gina? And because I was so...
That's is the sky blue and the grass green?
Exactly. It's like, because they have you like, you question your reality. This was my reality. And guess what? It is in black and white. It is written down. And it gave me, I was so afraid to talk to anybody at that point about anything really. I mean, I was a wreck. I mean, I was a wreck. There's no question. I walked around that town crying every day, and people would say, what's wrong with you? And I would tell them I didn't care. Because one of the things that I learned with domestic violence and with being abused and experiencing other abused children, and was one of the things that was first told to me was, number one, you do not have to tell anybody, not a soul, what you experienced as abuse. You do not have to give details unless you are in a court of law. And, usually you have an attorney who's competent, who's going to protect you. And, hopefully by the time you get to, you got to, go through discovery and stuff. Hopefully by the time you get to a trial date, they settle it. So you don't have to go through, and sit on a stand and stuff like that. But, you do not have to tell anybody the details of your abuse, to nobody. And nobody should be forcing you to either, because that is not, that is, further trauma. Because a lot of the people that do expect you or force you to disclose that information, they are not properly trained. They're not properly trained. They don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they're doing it for other reasons other than, appropriate reasons. And which is what was done in my case, I believe. One of the things that the judge, ordered me to do, there was no ordering of an IME. And oftentimes when you do have someone who has a medical record or therapy
What
record,
is an IME?
Independent medical examination. And so the only way that in Florida law, the only way that anybody could have gotten my records was another physician. And it was only to perform an IME. And that was never asked of my ex-husband, because I think he knew that at that time I would have asked one of him. And he would have flunked, I'm sure. He would have. I don't know if you could pass or flunk, but you know what I mean. Anyway,
it would have revealed something.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Tina. But maybe not too, because he's very conniving and cunning and very manipulative. So he can charm. He can charm anybody, right? Anyway. So I ended up having to hire another attorney to prevent the records from being used against me at trial. But, the damage is already done. And the law clearly says that you don't release records. It's usually for therapeutic reasons, or to treat or to provide further treatment for someone. And I'm the only holder of that right to privacy. My attorney doesn't have it. The judge can't waive it. My doctor can't waive it. You are the only holder of your private information like that. So, I knew that. And I kept saying, no, I'm sorry, that's confidential. You're not going to get that. No, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. And one of the things that was in my deposition was my attorney was sometimes was objecting and she sometimes wasn't. And then the next day we have a hearing and he's demanding my medical records. And she's saying, Your Honor, he knows that this is a problem. This is why she should not have her children. It's like, what? I'm like, what? And she's telling me to shut up. She's telling me to shut up. And I should have said, no, you shut up. You're fired. I'm done. And I should have been protecting myself, because with that hearing, it was a 10-minute hearing. The next day, he got my records because the judge ordered from all my records to be released to my ex-husband, which was against Florida law. Not only that, but in Florida law, there's a subpoena that's issued, and it's Connecticut is the same. Connecticut is pretty much the same. You do a 10-day notice for a subpoena to be issued. Okay. And during that time, you can object. And I objected. And within that time, then a court order is issued. You don't just go into court and says, Your Honor, we need them. There should be a notice of a subpoena and a court order. They have to go hand in hand. And there was one facility that did not release those records because they did not have a proper subpoena. So, and it's probably because I called them and said, if you release them, I'm going to sue you. Anyway, but, you really need to be mindful, because a lot of these states, okay, one of the things we all have, we all forget, because we're in this volatile situation, and we always think that, somebody who's being abused is going to be the victor, by getting out of it. And that's just really not the case.
Right.
Most all states are no fault states, which means they don't care if he slept with every cheerleader in town. One of my ex-husbands, I only had one. My ex-husband told me that I, told everybody that I slept with the entire football team at my, my high school football team. We never had a high school football team, so okay, but the thing is, the smear campaign was on.
Oh, and the smear campaign starts before you ever think it started. It starts from the day you meet the individual.
Exactly. There was always one of the things that I had to experience when I was married to him was, and I worked for attorneys for 7 years. I'd worked for a senator for 7 years. I had been working at that time for another big law firm, doing real estate, residential, doing title policies, insurance, policies, doing a lot of research on title. I would research property going back, going through an abstract. And it was just, I really loved what I was doing anyway. And, one of the things was I never wanted to get into litigation really, because it was just, I didn't want to get into that emotional side of it for me, because I am very sensitive to it. I know that I am very sensitive to people's situations. And, I don't like to see wrongs being carried out on people. So I really wanted to just have a carefree type of kind of,
you were wearing your rose-colored glasses, dear.
Exactly right.
Yes,
yeah.
I had a pair as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I just really want to be what does he say? Disassociated or I wanted to be detached. Let's put it that way. I wanted to live this detached
You've had your
life.
head buried in the sand,
Exactly.
which many of us do.
I wanted to just be the mom who took her children down to the island park with their bicycles on every Saturday. I wanted to sing wee silly songs. I wanted to bake cookies, for my children, do those things that fulfilled me as a mom, as a wife, whatever, and then just have my job, which I had a lot of passion for it. I loved it, anyway. So I lost my train of thought, Tina. I'm so good at doing that.
I know you are.
Much information in my brain that it just gets kind of all jumbled up.
The individual who wasn't going to amount to much, her head is full of knowledge and information.
Right.
So let's fast forward just a little bit. You lost your kids. How many years?
Well, one of the things that really is troublesome to me is this whole, you have to make your boundaries. I have boundaries. I think we all have boundaries. But there's certain people out there that don't believe that they have to respect other people's boundaries. And, when he was not coming home at the hours he would say he was, I would say, well, I don't know why. Where are you? What are you doing? This is not okay. And, of course, what are you on your period? Oh, you're not, you're PMSing. Oh, that's pack my suitcase time. There was all of these things that were just made you feel uneasy. You could never get, whenever you had an issue about anything, it was always turned to be an issue with me. It was something about me, one time my car was about to break, making a funny noise, and it was my imagination, and there's nothing wrong with the car. And so I drove down the street. Well, actually I drove to the next town over and broke down on the side of the road. Thank goodness I had my baby stroller, but it was pouring and there was somebody who offered me a ride, and I accepted it because it was pouring rain. I had my 2 babies and we were sitting out there for a while before someone came along. And you get into the car and you realize, oh my God, I'm accepting a drive from a stranger. Am I going to be okay? But I was, and I was really grateful that he gave me a ride because this was back when there was no cell phones. Okay. So I had to go to the payphone at the gas station, the remote gas station on this remote road. Right. And, it was like, there was no, care or concern that I could, something might be wrong with my car and I would break down on the side of the road. And that was just kind of how it was. I look back and I often look at the interactions that I had with him, and he honestly believed, that I was there to serve him and serve him only.
Oh, right,
And
right. No.
he could care less how he treated me, and that I was supposed to accept that. But, being someone who was, kind of independent, because I was, I learned at a young age that I had to take care of myself in most cases. And when I married him, I was looking at a man that I believed was, similar in age, and we were both going to grow together. We were going to build together. We're going to have this life together, and I didn't realize that that's not what he signed up for. He believed that, I was going to be stepping into his mother's shoes, which, that really wasn't my,
That wasn't going
wasn't
to be
my idea of a
your
relationship.
strong suit.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you,
It
Tina.
wasn't your strong suit.
No,
Into his mother's shoes.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on the hour.
Okay.
Now, as you went through this system and got hung out to dry, I mean, let's just call it what it is. You got hung out to dry. Your records were revealed. You lost your children. You ended up getting a degree anyway years later. But what would so for a woman out there who's listening, because we still know that predominantly abuse happens to women at the hands of men.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say for a woman who is thinking of leaving, or who has left, or maybe doesn't even realize what's happening? How can she protect herself? How can she advocate for herself? Over the course of 31 nights, we've talked a lot about how can a woman advocate, but from someone who's in the system.
Sure.
How would you suggest someone do that? And do it, and not do it perfectly, but do it well enough to.
Sure. Well, first of all, I really think it's important that you know who you can trust. You want to make sure that, first of all, your person is going to recruit flying monkeys. My ex-husband called people that he had no business calling, that were close to me only. He never had a relationship with these people, but he was very good at persuading people that something was wrong with me. So he was setting up the scenario for other people. Number one, do not disclose that you want a divorce. Do not say it. Do not hint it. Do not even give the slightest inkling that you are ready to,
fly the coop.
Thank you. Do not, because, that was my mistake, because then it set him in motion to do those things, to call people, to tell people that he's concerned, I'm acting funny kind of thing. She's doing weird things, just set it up, because a lot of times what they do is, for women especially, they use she's unstable, she can't have your children, she's unfit. So, one of those things that I need you to do is go to your, Google it, whatever, find out what your state is. Most often your state is no fault. I have a book, if anybody needs to find out what it is in their state, I have a book that tells me every state's laws. And most often the courts can award sole or joint custody, giving equal consideration to either spouse. And all that means is that they no longer give it to, just, they want to give the appearance that you both each have equal grabs at the children, right? Take stock in, if you have called the police, try to get those police records. If you have, like I said, if you have had mental health help, make sure you speak to your counselor about that. You make sure your records are safeguarded and that they only are going to be used for your benefit. One of the things about my ex-husband was he was an alcoholic. When I got a restraining order against him because he was torturing me with my medical record, my therapy records, I did get a restraining order for 2 weeks. And, during that time he went to AA meetings, And, curious enough, AA meetings, I tried to subpoena the AA meetings and they told me that it's confidential. Yeah, that's protected. So you make sure that you're protected all the way around before you go anywhere. Make sure that if there's any other thing in your history. I was arrested one time for um, assisting someone with a speech standing up for someone who had a speech impediment. Um, I was arrested for that because they're accusing the guy of being drunk, and I'm like, no, he's got a speech impediment, and this cop just kept coming up to me and wanting me to be arrested, so I got arrested. So anyway, he used that against me. But again, stealing a car and wrapping it around a tree,
that was okay.
That's okay. Yeah. And not only that, but he had cousins in the police force, and he also had a cousin who was an attorney, a criminal defense attorney. So, just make sure that you know what your issues are. Make sure that you safeguard yourself and focus on your own case. Try not to focus on what's going on around you. Just, make sure that you know what your issues are, and don't be afraid to be a broken record either. Just say, I went to counseling because I experienced a traumatic event, and I just felt like I needed to talk to somebody.
You need to know your own case.
Exactly.
I mean, if anything, you need to know your own case 360 degrees from every angle. What you think he might say, what you think he could say, what you think he will say.
Well, I think you should be mindful of it. But one of the things that I have found with a lot of women is that they're so afraid that he's going to keep maintaining that lie. And so they get stuck in it. Because we all know that they lie. So they get so fearful, and they get so like, oh my gosh, I can't do this because he's going to lie about it, and I don't even know what to say when he does. And something, let him lie.
Tell the truth.
Let him lie, and then just redirect yourself. But what you need to do is, make sure that, if you've been the stay-at-home mom for 3 years and you put your education on hold because he wanted you to be a stay-at-home mom, and he was going to provide for you, but he did not, he kept, you could only get $5 a week, and you had to, you know what I mean when you're talking about, if you had to put your life on hold for him to pursue his degree, those are things that there is case law out there about someone else's degree being a part of a marriage asset and to be divisible and to get a portion of. And I've seen it in several divorces where, the husband was a breadwinner. He had a degree. She helped put him through college. And, that was the family asset. It's where all the income came from. And she was able to get a portion of his income, coming from that, that thing. And so you need to know what you have. If you have a degree, check your degree, make sure that if you haven't been in the workforce for 5 years, that you ask for that alimony, rehabilitative alimony. See if your state offers that, and don't let your attorney push you around and say, oh, you're not going to get it. You stand, if your attorney is doing that, and put a nominal amount for a retainer down. If you have $10,000 and that's, do not put $10,000 down. You say, look, I can give you a $2,000 retainer, and then I'd like to see how we are after you spent the $2,000. But during that time, I expect this, and this. Don't let your attorney just give you, do nothing for you and then keep billing you. And try to keep your phone calls to your attorney down to a minimum, because they do bill by the hour. And you don't want to talk about your emotions at that time. You really do want to seek counseling. And my suggestion is to go somewhere and pay cash, and your name is Jane Doe. You do not have to tell anybody your business. It's not anybody's business. It's not something to be used against you. The thing that was so so illogical to me was, here on one hand they're telling me that I didn't, going to therapy obviously didn't help me for some reason, but they released my records and brought all this stuff back that I didn't remember anymore because I was moving on with my life. But then they're telling me to go to therapy, and it's like, well, obviously you didn't think it worked because you're using it against me, and you're telling me I need to continue to go. Why would you think, you know what, when you're having those days, yeah, you might need to talk to somebody, but sometimes, you need to sometimes just go to the beach. I know that sounds so lame or whatever. Read a book. Read a
Well, it
self-help
comes
book.
back to self
Exactly.
love and self care.
Exactly. Read a
Sometimes
book,
it's
go
back
to
it
the
off
beach.
and take a break.
Right. Sometimes it doesn't even mean going to see a friend. Don't, sometimes, upchucking your story to a friend is not helpful. Sometimes your friend might be playing both
Right.
ends and you don't know that yet.
True
So
too.
you might want to be just extra cautious of yourself. Um, you know, Stay away from drugs and alcohol. One thing that I never used to cope was drugs or alcohol. I think that's been my, saving grace, I suppose, because I don't use it as a crutch when things are bad. I read a book. I go to the beach. I go take a
I
walk in
drink
the,
coffee, so
yeah,
yeah, I
I
get
take
it.
a walk in the woods. I do things that are self-fulfilling as opposed to self-destructive. Um,
Well, one
so
of the things that we talked about early on in this 31 Nights was the case that you're working on. So I know you
yes,
have an update about that case. So let
yes,
me stop you for a moment, gather up your final thoughts. We're going to go over a little bit and give us an update about that case as well.
sure.
While you are having that final thought moment, I do want to share once again. We've got I've pinned this in the post. It's called the Shadow Work Journal. And I'll show it over here to the TikTok people if you can see it, the Shadow Work Journal. And it's in it, like I said, I pinned it in the little TikTok shop. It has a lot of great activities and things to help you to organize your thoughts, organize your feelings, work out some of your triggers, that kind of thing. It's got lots of writing space, lots of walkthrough guided exercises. So if you're interested in that, because we all know that good or bad, right or wrong, real or imagined. You know I'm going to say it.
Thank you
Um,
so much, Tina.
that trauma from childhood, trauma from the world, leads us to think certain things about ourselves. And if we are not careful, those very things we think about ourselves and the things that we don't think about ourselves is what leads us down the path we end up on. As much as you never own the abuse that you have endured, the trauma that may lead you to a place that does not support you, does not validate your worth, does not fit with your love language or your coping skills, because abusers, they push the buttons of your vulnerabilities. They figure out, you know, our guest last night said she doesn't know how to pick men. No, sadly, toxic, abusive men know how to pick vulnerable women. They know how to gain what they need to know from you to then manipulate, massage, love bomb, gaslight, all those things. So that's where you gotta flip the script. And the script is not to focus on them, as Gina said, but to focus on yourself and what you can do to advocate for yourself, especially when you go to court.
Mhm.
Because they're going to pull out all the stops and they're going to make up some stops. And the court system, I don't even want to say they're overworked and underpaid. I don't even want to go there because they could do better. Because as I have told Gina many times, and tonight, in fact, as well, and we talk about it all the time, the system created the monster, but then they feed the monster. They feed the abuser instead of the abused. And so, and I'm clarifying because I ain't got no teeth, and so my vocabulary is good, but my speech is bad tonight. But I want to make sure that you advocate for yourself, that you know who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. Because if you're not careful, you'll be led astray. And you'll be led astray by the system and by those who know how to use the system. And the system itself will use you, will continue to basically put you on the hamster wheel and spit you out. So, with all that said, two things. The shadow work journal is a I mean, if you don't know where to begin, you got to start somewhere. And self-love and self-care, for me, it began with a cup of coffee during the pandemic and no voice in my head telling me I wasn't worthy of something, and just sitting on the couch with my dog. Um, and I also have a subscription box, which is running late this month for various reasons. But it is Love Over Coffee, Reclaiming Self, and it talks about going back in time to heal that inner child. So the more work you can do to get yourself to a healthy place, as we said before, hurt people, but healed people help others. And that is where many of us need to find ourselves. And it's a long process and a long road. So now I'm going to shut the hell up and I'm going to let Gina give us an update about the case and also give us her final thoughts. And then I'm going to do a closing.
Thank you, Tina. Yes, the person that I've been working with recently, she is still she was supposed to have a court date on 10/26, and they moved it to 11/1. So tomorrow she's got a court date. But she was supposed to. She's been in custody at a facility for mental health. Um, where so she can become so they say emotion able to assist in her defense for her um, charges of domestic violence. And she was charged back in June of last year with domestic violence, violating a restraining order, but she had never been served. um, she was in custody. They took her. They came to her house. They took her into custody, and she had never been served. Her former husband has been calling to, or former partner had been calling the courthouse on a daily basis, saying that she was mentally unstable. She was hallucinating. She was making all these, claims against her that just were not true. And some of the things that he was saying can be substantiated, with other information that she did have and stuff like that. But nobody seemed to care. So they came and they arrested her June of last year, and the entire interaction was recorded because she had her phone on record and it came with her. So she heard the entire uh, police force talking about how they didn't care that she was not served. They didn't care. They were just going to arrest her anyway. And there was something said like, well, it didn't go to the way we planned, but it happened. So, we should all be grateful. And they're like kind of high fiving each other, like, good job kind of thing. But anyway, so she's been wrongfully arrested, wrongfully charged. She's been in, she was, there was a hearing back in December of last year that she was never given the date for. She was given the date after this purported date. I've seen numerous text messages going back and forth between her attorney, public defender, by the way, and herself, and there's no mention of the court date that she was supposed to appear at. It seemed like it was very set up. It was very like happenstance things. Oh, like, things happen and like, oh, we don't know. We didn't know. but it's almost like business as usual. And it's really just kind of disgusting and disheartening because it makes you afraid to ever call the police, to ever try to protect yourself. And, here in Connecticut, these laws are supposed to, be protecting, the abused, and they're not happening. So just recently she got in contact with me again. And the place that she's at, one of the things about mental health is you're supposed to be in mental health to help self-empower yourself. That's one of the biggest things that they're marketing now, is, I should say, because I think that is a big marketing point, is they're, wanting women to be self-empowered, to leave their own abusive situations, and, you know, direct themselves to get out of that situation, as opposed to relying on other systems. But when you have a mental health system that is just out of touch with reality, they've been out of touch with reality for probably since they started. But that's just another topic altogether. But
I was going to say, we got two topics that are coming up that I can tell you right now, but go ahead.
So they have her in this place where she, how she ended up there was she was standing up for her rights when she said, "Your Honor, I was never served." The judge got angry with her, said that she was belligerent, she was combative, and then he ordered her for a mental eval. She went for the mental eval, and of course, they find her to be incompetent, or not necessarily competent, but she needs to be institutionalized so that she can get some help for to assist her attorney in her defense, which her attorney is not doing anything for her. In fact, her attorney is putting her in a detrimental place, and in fact, her attorney has put her into that position. And so one of the things too is this young woman, she has epilepsy, and they have weaned her off her epilepsy medicine. Yeah, they weaned her off her epilepsy medicine. It's just kind of quite bizarre. It doesn't make any sense at all. But I mean, it just makes no sense at all how our system treats people. It just makes no sense. They would give dogs Prozac in these systems, but they won't give a human much needed medical,
right,
for something that's, I think, is serious. Serious. She's been in this situation. She's had COVID twice. She's had 2 eye infections. She's had other infections. It's really kind of sad, and it's distressing to hear her talk. There's limited that I can do. Most attorneys don't want to assist somebody who's has an attorney already. When they hear that you're in this situation, they are automatically programmed that there's something wrong with you, even though there's not. And all this young woman was doing was saying, "Your Honor, I never should have been in this situation. I didn't do anything." And when you have an attorney who tells you don't want to piss off the judge when you're telling the truth, there's something wrong with our system. Seriously, wrong with our system. And either we need to get attorneys who are, actually, qualified to even go through law school,
right?
As opposed to people who just have, families who want, their children to follow their alma mater. We need to have other people that are just really, who have a sense of what, the United States laws are, and that they're making sure that, the people of our country are being protected by our own laws, because that's what they're there for. And so, so unfortunately, she called me today. She was really distressed, and I mean, I hope it's not true, but they're trying to push for her to be there longer, which, she says, the lesser of two evils is being there as opposed to being incarcerated in a jail, because they're stricter there. So if she was to have an option, she would rather be stuck there, even though she wrongfully is there. And I certainly hope that when she gets out, she can get that attorney to help her with either a 1983 lawsuit, malicious prosecution, vexation, whatever. I think this is a case for that. But they're saying that she's not, listen to this. She's doesn't have control of her emotions. Now, mind you, she's been going through a domestic violence situation. They refused to assist her in the domestic violence situation. She's been wrongfully charged. She's been incarcerated. She hasn't seen her son for over a year. And they're telling her that she doesn't have control of her emotions.
Well, I know one thing. The last thing I'd have control over is my emotions.
And I don't think anybody would. And if anybody did to them what's being done to, other women and, men too, they would react the same way.
Right.
You can't put somebody and you can't take away their freedoms and then think that they're going to sit there and say, oh yeah, okay, I'm okay here. Yeah.
Right.
I don't mind seeing that cockroach walk across the floor. I don't mind not having, pictures on the wall and being stripped to nothing. I don't mind that. You will not. Most of these people that are on the other end in authority, they wouldn't be able to walk one step in most people's shoes that have gone through this. They have no concept of it at all. They have no concept of it. And it just makes you just wonder where is your good sense? You wonder why is it that they're relying on people that, are in these industries that, a lot of them don't have a degree. A lot of them don't have the sense of what these people are going through. They have none. They're like
a court hearing tomorrow because they want to determine that she needs to stay longer.
Oh yeah, they're keeping her. It's unreal. And what the state's attorney should be doing tomorrow is they should be going into court and they should be saying, Your Honor, we're dropping the charges. That's what they should be doing. Right.
But because, as she did, the alternative is she could end up in jail, which we know is not.
Based on what charges? What, you don't like her? Is that what you don't like the fact that she stood up for herself? You don't like the fact that she stood up for herself and said, Your Honor, I didn't do anything. I'm not guilty. And that pisses you off for a judge to get pissed off and say that you're belligerent and combative. Right. There's something wrong with the judge. There's something wrong with the system. And if there's not a state's attorney standing there saying, Your Honor, we're dropping all the charges. We believe that she needs to be immediately released. If her own attorneys are not saying, Your Honor, we should have filed a motion to dismiss right. At the onset of this case, this is such a miscarriage of justice. And it just makes you wonder, what country are we living in? One of the biggest things that, I've learned in all of this is there's this new I don't know how new it is. It's newly discovered by me a couple of years ago. This court stakeholder. Who are these court stakeholders? If we have another branch of government called court stakeholders, which are people who are involved in the system, prosecutors, judges, and other people other than the people that are involved who have an interest in this case, we need to really look at that, because there should not be this other branch of people that are interested in what goes on in the court system. It should be based on truth. Right. It should be based on truth and case-by-case basis. It should not be based on what's in the best interest of court stakeholders. I didn't even see anywhere in all my reading of all this stuff where we, the people, are involved in as a court stakeholder. Right. And that's what I thought our whole government was evolved on. And I don't know. I hear this president, an ad for a new president who talks about stakeholders. Who are these stakeholders? Each American person should be a stakeholder. So I don't understand who these court stakeholders. I hear it every time. I hear it all over now. Who are these court stakeholders? Please stand up and identify yourself.
Right.
I want to know who all you are, because I think that there's something wrong with our system, that we are being misled as to what's really going on. What is going on? Is there's this elite.
Well, I mean, we know there's lots of conversations that go on behind the scenes before it ever gets into the courtroom. And sometimes it seems like theatrics win out over truth. And high profile cases get the coverage, and it's the day-to-day that doesn't. And there's a lot of things that go on in the high profile cases when everyone is watching that don't occur in the day-to-day. Because the day-to-day isn't being watched as closely, shall we say. Well, I know we're over time. So, number one, at some point, you've got to come back and talk about your nonprofit, Sweet Corner Girl. At some point, you need to come back and talk about the mental health system. And I know there are some other advocates out there that also could definitely lend to that conversation. And I also think that at some point you'll need to come back and update us about this young woman who is, for no good reason, in a mental health facility. And I hope it's not that she goes to jail if she's not there, but that you're right that she gets released. It's been 31 nights. I want to say thank you to you for starting and ending.
Having
It's
me.
never a dull conversation. It's never a complete conversation. And for those who are listening and watching, I know that it seems like a conversation that goes here and goes there and then comes back to here and goes there again. That's because think about when you go someplace to have a conversation with your friend, they grow organically. And I think we live in a world where we really don't know how to have a conversation these days. We make a post on social media and then no one comments, no one says anything. If they do, we don't comment back. So there's not an engagement sometimes. Um, and I think that art of conversation is missing in our world. Um, so when you go have a conversation with a friend who may or may not agree with you, may or may not look like you, may not believe like you, may not think like you know, allow yourself to have that moment of what can their lived experience give to me and what can my lived experience give to them, because in somewhere in that lived experience is an exchange of love and community, whether it's over coffee or not. It could be over any beverage, could be over anything.
Diet Coke.
Um, but yeah, she's Diet Coke. I mean, weirdo. Um, but I just want to say, some conversations are hard to hear, hard to know, hard to believe, hard to understand. And that's where we need to be. I know another passion of mine is racial justice. And if you're living in the world that's predominantly white and the systems are predominantly white, then your world is all white. Because another piece of this puzzle is poverty and racism within the justice system, the educational system, the political system, the social system. So, with all that being said, I want to thank you. You've been here for 31 nights, but this conversation isn't over. It doesn't end. For those of us who are healing, for those of us who are learning and loving and trying to support and advocate for others, we continue on. It is a daily intentional ritual to self love and self care, but it is also a daily intentional ritual to advocate for others because we realize that we advocate for others because in some ways no one advocated for us or they didn't advocate correctly. So thank you to all who are listening and watching on TikTok. I want to thank you for the love and the likes and the gifts over the last 31 days. I hope that something we have said helps you either to realize how strong you are, how strong you could be, how strong you've needed to be, that basically you are a voice for yourself, for others, and for those who have no voice, and for those who have a voice that has been permanently silenced. So go have whatever you need to have now, a moment to reset, to regroup, because guess what? Tomorrow starts another 30 days. We're not going to be online every day, but 30 days after 31 nights, the conversation needs to continue. It needs to go on every day, multiple times a day, just in thinking about what you can do to share and love and support others. So, with that, I'm going to say good night. The trauma, the shadow work journal in the business section of this TikTok shop, as well as the subscription box. Those are two things. But you know what? Those are two things that require money. There are lots of things that you can do that don't require any money. Go find one of those things. Go help at a shelter. Go help at a church somewhere that's advocating for domestic violence. Go do something that doesn't require cash. Because one of the things that we have found out is financial abuse is real and not everyone has it. So go do what you can. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to end the TikTok. I want to say thank you again to my moderators, Nicole, Cat Links, Mar, Sue, Angel. They've been here mostly every night. I want to say thank you for being here, for moderating the comments, because I am major multitasking. Many of you know that I'm not the greatest at multitasking at times, so I appreciate your being here to help with that. Um, Thank you again for those who have tuned in. Thanks for the love and the likes and the shares and the gifts, because it all matters, because you matter and your story matters. So, love over coffee, voices not heard. This is a platform and a podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And so, with that, we say goodnight to TikTok. Thank you so much, Sue. I appreciate your kind words. Let me go ahead and end the live over here. I am going to come over here, Gina. I'm going to shrink this screen. And we're going to look over here. We have a lot of comments over here on the real change. I don't know if you can see the comments.
I cannot. No, I don't see any comments here.
So my goodness. So we've got thank you, Carol. Thank you, Cluster Be Free, Karen. Um by the way, I changed my YouTube page. It now matches. My YouTube page is now called Love Over Coffee. So go like us over there. We've got Carol, great 31 awareness nights for the abused. Janine, hi, Tina and Gina. We've got Janine saying that here in Albuquerque, she's had a lot of unfair, crappy outcomes in the system. Aloha, Karen, and everyone else. I'm late because I forgot, but thanks to Karen, I'm here now. Let's see. Hey, Queen Sunshine.
Hi.
We know her from Clubhouse. Thank you, everyone. Victim shaming a childhood trauma survivor. That's from Fowler Book Critic. I didn't start healing from my childhood trauma until age 44. But does that mean I was abusive or irrational? No. Their legal decision was zero logic.
Yeah.
Or their legal decision had zero logic.
Absolutely. You're out of touch with reality. That's what I think.
Right. Litigation is really something to go through, but God really moved for me. That's Queen Sunshine. Here's someone saying Gina is the best. She has helped and encouraged me to go into the courtroom and handle business. She helped me get my second order of protection without a lawyer.
Anytime you need me, I'm right here. Even if we don't talk for a long time, I've just got so many things on
Queen Sunshine says she'd like to have that book. It's important to know each state law.
Sure.
So if you want to like screenshot that to me or something, I'll post it.
Sure.
Um, she says, I wish I knew this at first. The one I had was terrible. The best thing was when I couldn't afford her, I did better without her.
Exactly. Same here. I got more. I got further representing myself than I did
Yeah,
with any attorney.
yeah. Um, Absolutely, Tina. The law helps abusers more than victims. My friend, lawyer, does lawsuits. She definitely needs to file suit. Talking about the person that you're representing right now, as an advocate, a special group or advocate paralegal. Um, a special group of us are starting a movement for children's rights, and we've uncovered a lot of money and red tape running the judicial system and the media. Imagine that. Um, and I'm only saying Gina's reference to something really terrible wrong running the judiciary system is correct. Yeah, yeah. So, um, and I don't know if I know Fowler Book Critic. Other than that name, I'm going to have to look you up. Please be sure to love and like the page. Again, I'm on YouTube as Love Over Coffee. Every place you like helps the algorithm. So I would appreciate if you would go like us in one of the other places. Sweet Corner Girl is Gina's nonprofit. It's on Facebook and on Instagram. I know she has not done much lately, but that's going to change. But the more likes that she gets, then
Of my page. Yeah, go to my page and like my page.
okay,
Because
yeah.
right now I'm stuck. I had a breach in my email. Um, so I know you did too, Tina.
Yeah, my Instagram got hacked.
Yeah. So
So I
I've
started
had
a
that with
new
my
one.
email and I think my Instagram as well. Um, and some other issues that came up. So, I just have to get, it back. Either I
Right.
have to just ditch it and get a whole new one or do
And
something. So,
Scholar Book Critic, I be honest, I was very, very active on Clubhouse. I do not like its changes,
same here.
and therefore I'm not. My profile is on Clubhouse, but I'm not active at all in Clubhouse.
Same here. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm not impressed with its changes.
Me
Um,
either.
so, if they wanted, if they what's the song by Beyonce? You should have put a ring on it. Clubhouse should have put something out that told me they was about to change everything and help me understand. If they wanted me to be a part of Clubhouse, they needed to be more uh, forewarned about the changes because I can't figure nothing out. And you know what? I'll be honest, I ain't got the energy to do it.
Yeah.
They could have made it easier. So love Clubhouse for the community I've built and the people I met there and know, but
That's how we met.
definitely follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Oh, as Defeating Childhood Trauma. Okay, now I know who you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now I know who you are. So, Gina, I
Tina.
love you, girl.
Love you too.
Sweet corner and all. Um, and so we are on the road to improving all our systems and all of our platforms. So stay tuned. More to come, especially from Sweet Corner Girl. So thank you all for tuning in. It's been 31 nights, and I really do appreciate your love and your support and your presence. It means a lot, and it does help get the word out. So thank you again, and I will say good night.
Good night, Tina. Thanks so much for giving us a platform.
Oh, you're welcome. Stay right there,
Voices,
Gina. Let me end this.
voices now
Bye,
heard.
everybody. Yeah, love or coffee. Voices now heard.